Does that epic battle you pictured in your mind just dissolve into a 4-hour accounting session where you occasionally roll some dice? This is one of the biggest complaints in all of tabletop gaming. My combat is taking way too long. But what if I told you the solution isn't buried in some obscure rulebook or a complicated system hack? What if the secret to fixing your game was figured out over 100 years ago by a physicist who was a lot more interested in the speed of light than the speed of your barbarian's greataxe? We're going to use Albert Einstein's theory of relativity to understand the deep psychological reason your combat feels so painfully slow, and how that same theory holds the key to making it fast, dynamic, and the highlight of your session. First, let's understand the problem, the relativity of boredom. We've all been there. The game master lays out the beautiful map, the minis are painted, and the stakes are sky high. The party's bard lobs a perfect insult at the orc war chief. We roll for initiative, and then it starts. That slow, methodical crawl from one person's turn to the next. The wizard spends 5 minutes trying to figure out which of their 37 spells is the perfect mathematical choice for this exact moment. The fighter can't remember how their offhand weapon works. The rogue is scrolling through on their phone because their turn is still 10 minutes away. And you're just waiting. Waiting for your 6 seconds of in-game action, which somehow takes 15 minutes of real-world time to get through. The excitement, the danger, the chance for heroics, it all gets swallowed up by the procedural swamp. The problem isn't just that combat is actually slow. The problem is also that it feels slow. And that feeling, that perception of time, is everything. A lot of GMs try to fix this with band-aids, like using average damage for monsters or putting a timer on players' turns. And these things can be helpful, but they're not the only way to treat it. Usually the real issue isn't on the clock, it's in our heads. And that brings us to Albert Einstein. The popular version of Einstein's quote goes something like this: put your hand on a hot stove for a minute and it seems like an hour. Sit with a pretty girl for an hour and it seems like a minute. That's relativity. He was showing that our experience of time isn't fixed. It's subjective. It stretches and shrinks depending on what we're doing and how we're feeling. When you're engaged, captivated, and having fun, time flies. When you're bored, in pain, or just checked out, your hand is on the hot stove, every single second feels like an eternity. This is the absolute heart of our problem. Your combat is slow because for most people at the table, for most of the fight, their hand is on the hot stove. They aren't active participants in a nail-biting story. They're waiting in line. So the question, how do we make turns faster, isn't the only question we need to ask. We also need to ask, how do we make the whole fight feel less like a stove and more like, well, you get it. So where are these hot stoves at our game table? They usually come from 2 places. 1, mechanical drag, and 2, narrative disconnect. First, we'll talk about mechanical drag. This is the obvious one. It's constantly having to look up rules, double check character sheets, and add up modifiers. Modern D&D especially gives players a dizzying array of choices, actions, bonus actions, reactions, free actions, item reactions. It's a lot. This creates a huge cognitive load and players get paralyzed by choice, desperate to make the optimal move. It's not their fault. The game practically encourages it. But the result is dead air. While one player is deep in analysis paralysis, everyone else at the table has checked out. The second, and I'd argue more critical source, is narrative disconnect. This is when the mechanics of the fight get completely detached from the story. The combat stops being a desperate struggle to save the village and just becomes a math problem where the goal is to get a big number, whether to reduce the monster's HP or to overcome their toughness. It's the difference between saying I attack the goblin and seeing the goblin about to cut the rope bridge, I let out a battle cry and swing my axe, trying to knock him off balance before he dooms us all. When the why is gone, all that's left is the how. And the how is just rolling dice and subtracting numbers. When a fight has no meaning, it has no narrative gravity to pull players in and keep them focused. So what's the solution? How do we bend time and make combat more fun? How do we turn that hot stove into a thrilling, can't look away experience? We have to change our frame of reference. The goal is to make everyone feel involved all the time. Here are 4 ways to do just that. First thing we can do is to make time collective, not individual. The turn-based system creates a my turn, your turn bubble. We need to pop it. As a GM, when you describe what happens, talk to the table. Grog, your axe bites deep into the ogre's shoulder. Alara, you see this and have to jump back as the monster stumbles, roaring in pain. Bilbo, Grog's ferocious attack has just created an opening. You're up. What do you do? By doing this, you're keeping everyone's head in the game. You're making them picture the battlefield from their character's perspective, even when it's not their turn. As a player, you can help by thinking about your move before your turn comes up. The GM and the players are giving you a constantly evolving puzzle. Use that time to plan so when your turn hits, you're ready to act. And don't just plan what your character is doing mechanically. Think about what they're doing narratively, how you're going to describe it to the rest of your party. The second thing we need to do is to crank up the narrative gravity. A fight against Bandit number 7 is boring. A fight against Kalen, the Black-Hearted, the man who burned your family's farm and wears your father's signet ring on his finger, is personal. It has stakes. Before a fight kicks off, make sure the players know why it matters. What happens if they lose? And it can't just be a TPK. Give the combat goals beyond kill all the bad guys. Maybe they need to protect an NPC, stop a runaway cart, or pull 3 different levers across the room while fending off enemies. These dynamic scenarios force players to think as a team. They have to make meaningful choices, and meaningful choice is the absolute bedrock of the engagement. The third thing we need to do is to marry mechanics to the narrative. Every single dice roll is a prompt for the story. A miss isn't just a whiff. It's the clang of a sword on a shield, a desperate last-second dodge, a lunge that gets parried away. A successful hit isn't just you do 8 damage, it's a staggering blow, a well-placed arrow that makes the enemy cry out, a crackle of magic that leaves the air smelling of ozone. Encourage your players to describe what they do. Don't let them just say, I cast Fireball. Ask them, what does that look like? What arcane words do you shout? This goes for GMs too. Give the monster's actions some personality. The goblin doesn't just attack. It snarls, drooling, and lunges its rusty knife, trying to find a weak spot in your armor. Constantly translating mechanics back into the story keeps the world alive and makes the numbers feel like a consequence of the action, not the point of it. Fourth, you need to be dynamic and unpredictable. The battlefield should not be a static grid. Make the environment change. Maybe the burning building starts to collapse. Maybe reinforcements arrive for either side. Maybe the monster reveals a terrifying new power halfway through the fight. Predictability is boring. Uncertainty is exciting. The goal is to break up the monotonous pattern of I attack, you attack. Keep your players on their toes and they won't have time to get bored. Now, I have a question for you. What's the single biggest thing that makes combat drag at your table? Is it players getting lost in the rules, analysis paralysis, or something else like a cell phone? In the end, solving slow combat isn't about speed, it's about perception. A 2-hour combat filled with thrilling moments, impossible choices, and awesome descriptions will feel faster and more exciting than a 30-minute fight that's just a repetitive slog. Einstein's analogy shows us that our experience of time is a direct result of our engagement. By focusing on keeping every single player invested in the shared story of the fight, from the first initiative roll to the final bloody blow, we can literally bend time at our table. We can turn combat from a chore that slows down the game into the cinematic, high-stakes, and wildly fun event it's supposed to be. So next time your combat starts to crawl, don't just try to make it faster. Make it more engaging. Make it matter. And you'll discover that time, as Einstein knew, is all relative. I hope this is helpful, and until next time, stay savage.